Now they are. Hey, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I apologize, I had a minor technical difficulty there. We are going to be joined by Case Dixon today. He is a congressional candidate. He's running against Gary Palmer. So if you don't like Gary Palmer, you're going to be in for a treat. Hey, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Speaking of which, I can't speak for Adam exactly, but this is not going to be an unbiased interview on my part because of my undying loyalty to Congressman Palmer. April Fools. Actually, it's because, as I've told him, he is the one of the more compelling Republican candidates we've seen for this lovely district in a while, on account of the fact that, at the very least, right, in addition to making specific uh, policy points that I agree with, such as, on critiques of the current regime Middle East policy, and, agreeing with me that the DHS is overfunded, probably. I say definitely, he said probably least, but, he's a libertarian. He likes small government. So logically, if you don't like big government, you don't necessarily like big, security organizations, federal security departments that were created post 9/11, right? But, yeah, those specific things is represents in general running on an actual policy platform and actual principles rather than on loyalty to a president, which is what Gary Palmer and a lot of his Republican opponents in previous primaries have run on. When I lived over in Hoover, near Rocky Ridge, I had to pass by this, big, as if that area, right, that kind of commercial area, right, that they had the sign in wasn't ugly enough, right? They put this big old sign, Gary Palmer standing next to Trump, right? So that's the point of Gary Palmer, and that's Palmer's campaigns, and it's the point of a lot of his primary opponents over the last few years is how loyal they are to President Trump, and that's not what Case is about. Case is about actual policy. He's about actual principles. I think on the other hand, Congressman Palmer, Representative Palmer, Gary from the sticks, as he may have once affectionately been known. Um, it no longer represents kind of principled, accessible leadership that this district needs, if he ever did. I think he's basically going to do whatever Mike Johnson and the regime tell him to. Maybe if he had been successful in becoming Speaker of the House instead, then I would have had some interest in, right, like keeping him where he is because if nothing else, right, this is a majority Republican district, so having the Republican leader be in your district is kind of neat, But he put his name in the hat. It didn't go far, so Gary Palmer is kind of just dead weight, you know.
Alrighty. Now, if you like if you're enticed by what you hear so far and you want to hear more, Case will be joining us shortly. We appreciate your patience. Stand by.
Yeah,
everything. Yeah, we're able to. We're able to. Speaking words. I'm gonna boost that audio, but yeah. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Joining us now is Case Dixon, candidate for U.S. Congress. Case, how we doing?
Good. How are y'all doing?
We are doing swimmingly. Now we heard y'all were running. We heard you were running for Congress against Mr. Gary Palmer. That caught our eye, and it is for that reason. It is for that we would like to ask you a few questions. Mainly, Jacob would, if you would be so inclined.
Absolutely. I'd welcome it.
Alrighty. So, Jacob, if you don't mind getting us started, I am just doing a final sound check.
Going forward, and just to be clear, the audience is seeing all of us right now.
They are seeing and hearing everybody.
Okay, good deal. Just so we're on the same page, Adam, the way I want this to go, right, between the two of us is like I want to ask one question, and then if you're ready, I'll nod towards you, and I'll let you ask the next question. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. Case, is that good for you?
Sounds good to me.
Alrighty.
All right. So, first question: how old are you, and when did you first register to vote?
I'm 26 years old. I just turned 26 on the 18th of March, and I registered to vote, if not on my 18th birthday, right around that time, probably within the week, I would say.
Yeah, that's good to it's good to hear as a congressional candidate that you registered basically as soon as you could because per the Constitution, everyone is allowed to vote at 18, but the government can't really, no one can really make you register at 18, so it's good that you've been active for that long. On the other hand, for those who don't realize, 25, right? He said he was 26, right? 25, as Case would know, is actually the minimum age you have to be to run for U.S. Congress. And it's interesting, it's one of those issues where the framers seem to be ahead of the curve because the modern neurological consensus happens to be that that's also when your prefrontal cortex finishes developing. But I want to ask you, right? So we may all be able to agree that your Republican opponent, the incumbent Congressman Palmer, has been in office for way too long, but he also spent a lot of time as a private citizen and a public advocate before he ran for federal office. So, what would you say to someone who says, Mr. Dixon, I agree with a lot of things you say. I think you would make a good leader. However, I'm not necessarily comfortable trusting my vote to someone who doesn't have that much life experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that question a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, concerning Congressman Palmer and his length of time in office. There's several things there. Number one, I think as a limited government conservative, I think that the longer you stay in office, you're more likely to grow the size of government or to stray from what you originally intended to do, because at some point it becomes more about preserving your seat than about serving the people you originally went to represent. And if you're thinking, oh, well, there's this I can do now, or there's one more thing I need to get done, or this is one more reason to stay. I mean, you can always find another reason to stay if you truly look for it. But does that outweigh the benefits of having turnover in office and having new, fresh people come into the role and pushing and maybe rigorous in what they're pushing for? Not necessarily, especially as a conservative standpoint. I'm not saying that the person needs to come in with new, progressive, just radical ideas compared to what was there before, but I think it's good to have fresh energy in the seat. But also, too, as someone younger, I know you touched on not having as much life experience. That is true. I don't have as much life experience as Congressman Palmer or anyone else that's almost 3 times my age. But I think it is important in this country that we do have a wide-ranging view of different viewpoints, because each person is going to understand the plight of their generation better than someone else that's not a part of that generation. And so that's not to say we don't need folks that are on up there in age in Congress. I think that is still important. I don't think that we should have a Congress full of folks in their 20s and 30s. But I think it's important that we have people in their 20s and their 30s, their 40s, 50s, all the way through, because they're going to be more in tune with the issues that their generation is facing. And I think that's very important.
Well, perhaps one of the first critiques that you could make of Palmer on this very issue you're addressing, right, is that he's not been consistent about it. He pulled, sort of what I think is a cheap move, unless he really believes what he said about it, which is you can't really prove either way, right? But which is that he said, he made a sort of term limit pledge, and then he went back on it and said, well, God told me to go back on my term limit pledge. I think if he's being dishonest about that, or if he's not even 100% sure that actually happened, as a Christian who reads the Bible in context, I would say that he was probably, not only breaking his promise to the voters, but taking the Lord's name in vain. But on the other hand, there are objective advantages to staying in office for longer, aren't there? In terms of representing your constituents.
Yeah, there's no, the argument that I always hear is that, well, hey, I've got a senior position, I've got more leverage, I can do this and that. And that may be true, but that's where I would bring people to Congressman Palmer's record and say, take a look at his record. The seniority is only a benefit if it's a benefit. But if we're looking at your record and it's been reckless, adding to the debt, adding to the deficit, it's been things that are unconstitutional, the FISA reauthorizations, the foreign aid and spending. I mean, the things that conservatives would oppose and that I would oppose. We look at your seniority. It's like, okay, it's not about what you could do, because that's really the argument that they're making. If someone's using the seniority argument, it's like, well, look what I could do in the future if I stay a little bit longer. It should be less about what you could do, and okay, yeah, you've been there for 14 years. Let's take a look at what you have done. And I would say, in this case, if you look at what Congressman Palmer has done, it's a lot worse than good. And I think that we could have someone in that seat that's doing a better job.
Yeah, and to those who aren't clear on this, when he references the FISA reauthorizations, he's referencing cases referencing the Patriot Act and mass surveillance of American citizens.
Yeah, and specifically, if you don't mind if I add to that, really the FISA Section 702, which is, I think, really the worst part of it all, which is if you were communicating with someone, let's just say you were communicating with someone that is outside of the United States, the government can then grab those communications and go through them, put them away in a file it back to your name and this other person's name that you're communicating with, and they can go pull that up and look at it whenever they want to without a warrant. But you're an American citizen, and those are your communications. Yes, you might be communicating with someone outside of the United States, but the key thing is that they are also capturing American citizens' communications and then able to view them, hold them, look at them, all without even obtaining a warrant. And it's honestly too easy to obtain a warrant many times, but that at least gives some form of safeguard and some stopgap to make sure that American citizens' Fourth Amendment rights are not being trampled on. And yet we've seen Congressman Palmer vote to reauthorize the FISA Section 702 twice in the past, and it's actually coming up here in April up for reauthorization again. And so I'm curious to see what he does. He may vote against it because I'm putting some pressure on him. But honestly, my opinion is that if leadership tells him to vote for it, he'll vote for it. And that's really my biggest gripe with Congressman Palmer, is that he is more accountable to leadership at this point than the constituents, and that's what is allowing him to keep his seat.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I said in the intro. And as a liberal or left leaning Democrat in the state who's really in the minority in this district, and even in like my little municipality in the district, which is Homewood, right? I'm kind of still in the minority, even look at that part. But like my perspective used to be, someone like Palmer is like, oh, he's a little more reasonable, so maybe it's good if he wins by like 70 to 90%, so that we keep these people who that make me a little more uncomfortable, right? Like some of the folks who were running in the last primary, right? But now my perspective is, now that the Trump administration has come back in, I'm like, well, actually, right, these are the people who are they're keeping the worst part of the current system in the current situation, right? They're the main guardians for it, whereas like outsiders like you are willing to make those actual critiques because you're not beholden to the same lobbyists or to Mike Johnson or to what have you.
Right, exactly.
All right, so one thing that I noticed is that going through this is just a preliminary, But I noticed that going through your Facebook page, your platforms, while they're strong, while they're distinct and clear, they seem to be, and I'm just speaking from observation here, they seem to be shared by a lot of Republican leaders in Congress. They seem to be not necessarily shared, but echoed in a sense. Um, I was wondering what you had thought about that makes you feel unique from them, because a lot of the candidates that stand out in a special way tend to be remembered further down the road. And I was just wondering if you had put some thought into that or had planned to branch out in a sense. You get what I'm trying. You get what I'm trying to articulate. I had generally wrote this
I
question
think I get
down.
what you're trying to say. I'll answer, and then you can tell me if I answered it adequately or was answering the question you're asking. It's no doubt I am a conservative. I would consider myself a Republican. I would say it's what the Republicans claim to stand for instead of what sometimes that they do, what the actual party stands for, which is limited government, individual liberty, and really just making sure that we adhere to the Constitution. And so that obviously I'm going to have a lot of I'm going to share the views of many Republicans and conservatives in that regard. And that's where my main critique is from Congressman Palmer or the current administration or whoever it may be. The Democratic administration, if they were in power, I'm quite sure, is that we have to stay true to the principles that we say we're going to adhere to as conservative and as Republicans. And that's where I think that I differ from Congressman Palmer. And so, yes, absolutely, I'm going to share many viewpoints with others, but it's the times that the administration or Mike Johnson or whoever strays from those principles that I'm willing to call it out instead of just go along with whatever the flow is at that time. And really, I'm just trying to call balls and strikes and stay true to and be consistent in what I'm advocating for and what I stand on.
Okay, so you. Okay, so yeah, that actually answers it perfectly. So you are standing up to what you feel is dishonesty, and
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever my own party strays from the principles that they say that they're going to adhere to, I'm still going to be left standing where I was before. I'm not going to just go along to get along just because other folks may move on certain positions.
So, if you don't mind, Adam, that is sort of a good transition to point to one of the questions I had. So, as Case, I'm sure knows, District 6, which is, a lot of the anchors are in upper middle class, or middle class suburban Birmingham, like Homewood, Hoover, Vestavia. We are bordered by a couple of Democratic districts. One is District 2, which is represented by Shamari figures. It includes parts of the Mobile area, parts of the Montgomery area, and then we have District 7, represented by Terry Sewell, which includes Birmingham, Rosedale in Homewood, and Tuscaloosa. So, Case, if you were to win, what kind of issues could you see yourself working with Representative Sewell and figures on?
Great question. I think I do have some bipartisan things that, as far as my platform is concerned, that I think we might be able to agree upon. First and foremost is going to be term limits. I would hope that we could agree on something like that. I'm not sure exactly where Representative Sewell and Figures stand on that issue specifically, but it's really nonpartisan or bipartisan. I think that we can agree that when I say we, I'm talking about me, you, folks on the other side of the aisle. I think that we can agree that it would be beneficial to have more turnover in office and being able to have more citizen-led leaders instead of career folks that are in there. But also a thing that I think that we could agree upon is in regards to cannabis. I am actually opposed to the scheduling of where it's at right now. I know President Trump just signed an executive order recently, but right now cannabis on the federal level is considered a Schedule 1 substance, meaning it has no medical use whatsoever. I think common sense can tell us that that is actually not the case. And we've already seen that many states just kind of disregard this federal law anyway, and the federal government doesn't even go after them. But it does still create some headaches and problems because let's say a state has a law that says that cannabis can be used medically, but then if you have a federally backed insurance program, whether that's through the VA or whether that's through Medicare, they won't pay for it because technically it's still illegal federally. And so it just creates a lot of headache and gives people more problems. So I'm actually in favor of the federal government getting out of this thing altogether, doing away with the Controlled Substance Act and allowing the states to decide at that point. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be recreational marijuana or medical use marijuana for every state, but that means the states can actually decide, which they're already doing for the most part, but then when they do decide, it's not going to create headaches. So if a state has decided we can have medical use marijuana, like Alabama has decided, then whenever you have a federally backed insurance program, you're not going to have any problems there. And so I would think that me and a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle could actually get on board with this.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and I've noticed, right, in this year, and I think it's been the case in previous years, right, like with the medical, with the Alabama Cannabis Coalition, right, we've interviewed at least one other candidate who's been endorsed by them. Perhaps both of the candidates we've interviewed already have been endorsed by them. But what it is, is like, it's the same thing with the term limits thing, right? I see a lot of people taking term limits pledges. So like incumbent Democrats and Republicans who are running in this state will get endorsed by like the business council, and then the people who are running opposition in either party will be taking these like term limit pledges, and they'll get endorsed by the Cannabis Coalition because like the incumbents aren't going to touch that,
Right, right. And another thing, too, when we're talking about bipartisan legislation, I think a ban on congressional stock trading. I'm not sure that Representative Sewell would agree with me on that one. I know that I saw where she was one of the highest stock traders in Congress, so I'm not sure that her and I would be on board. But I think that a lot of both Republicans and Democrats or independents or whoever it may be can agree that whenever you have folks in Congress that are privy to private information, that they shouldn't also be allowed to trade stock using that information or allegedly using that information. I think it just undermines public trust and undermines the office. And I would think that a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle could agree upon that.
Yeah, we're all human, and I know both parties do it. I would hope that if push came to shove, right, and there was a good chance of passing a ban on it, just like how Congress has previously passed restrictions on it, even though we needed those restrictions because they were all doing it. I would hope, right, when it came down to that Terry Sewell would put aside any of her personal interests and just vote for it. But I could be right, I could be wrong.
And I don't mean to cast stones specifically at Representative Sewell. I know we were talking about if I could agree with figures in Sewell and anything, if we could accomplish something together. Look, Congressman Palmer, he's traded lots of stock. He's made over 200 stock trades in office. I know Tommy Tuberville has one of the highest stock traders in the Senate. So, nobody's above criticism, but I just referenced her, I guess, specifically because we were talking about if we could work together.
No, I know you're not running against him. That was the Ken McFeeters interview. So I won't spend too much time talking about him, but I thought do you remember what happened when Tuberville was confronted on that? Like so he came out right one time in like 2021, the first year he was in office, and he said, "Oh, it's a ridiculous idea." So he actually like came out and like bashed the law, right? Which I think even from like a strategic move, right? If you knew that like that was a thing that was like a big part of your life, was doing these like controversial and sometimes illegal stock trades, that you would want to just like keep your mouth shut. He chose to talk about it anyway and bash the idea of banning it. And then they reported that he had like violated the law a bunch of times just that year,
Right. And here's the thing is that it's impossible for me to sit here and say who's actually using insider knowledge and who's not. But what I do know is what it looks like. And that's the problem, is whether or not your leader, let's just use Senator Tuberville, for example. He said that he actually doesn't manage that, and it's someone else that manages that. I have no idea. You have no idea. And there's no way for us to actually know that. And that's really the underlying problem, because we can't, and sometimes you can't prove that people have broken the law and they have used insider knowledge, or they did make trades and didn't disclose them. But, I think we saw Senator Brett, she had missed disclosing some trades and actually donated some money to charity. But the problem is that we just don't know, and it undermines the office and it undermines public trust. And so I think the common sense solution would be, hey, let's just say you're not going to do this at all. That way no one's sitting there scratching their head or even making those accusations. Because let's say you have a leader that is actually doing things according to the law, and they just have a really good person that's managing all of this. and now they're getting these crazy accusations lobbied towards them. It's like, okay, let's just avoid.
Appearance of
We
impropriety.
can move on to bigger and better issues. Just keep things above board. Let's ban congressional stock trading. If you need to invest, I get it. There's a lot of older folks in Congress, especially. You need to invest to prepare for the future. But whenever you're serving this office, it's supposed to be a public service. It's not supposed to be a get rich quick scheme, or it's not supposed to be, it's a sacrifice. It is what it is, and so that's why we have blind trusts, and that's part of the sacrifice. I think, as whenever you're serving the American people in that way, is that you forego your ability to trade stock individually, and you have to put things in a blind trust.
Yeah, so I was, when I read your platform on congressional stock trading on your website, I was curious about how you've thought through one aspect of what you said, which is that you would not only ban members of Congress from trading, but you would also ban their family members. And out of context, right, that reads to me like, well, what if like my cousin is a member of Congress in like 2 states away and I don't talk to him, but now I'm not allowed to trade stocks? That doesn't sound fair.
Yeah, so my viewpoint is that it should just extend to immediate family members that are within the household. So either your spouse and your dependent children, if you have dependent children. But if you have adult children that don't live with you, I mean, there's always ways around the law, but we want to make it as airtight as we possibly can. And so I think your spouse is an obvious thing there, because y'all are living together, you're married, and then your dependent children, if you've got folks that are still living with you in the home, then they should be banned as well. But outside of that, if you have a cousin that's in Congress, there's only so much you can do, and I don't think it should be extended to folks that are distant relatives or even folks that are not even in the home.
Right, that makes sense. And I would say it's also, that's very fair in the sense that, there are lots of working class or white collar, private citizens or like military people who understand what it is to not be able to do certain things that other people can do, or not be able to act in certain ways because of like their parents or their family's position, right? Like my parents were in, nonpartisan media for a long time, right? So I couldn't have like brought them along while they were working in those positions. I couldn't have been like, hey, come to this like protest with me or something, or said, my dad thinks, or like if you're in the military, you probably, right, if you're like a military kid, you probably can't behave certain ways that other kids behave just because of like the obligation that your family is under. So I think that's very reasonable and very fair. We don't want necessarily like wives and dependent children of members, Congress members, to be finding ways around the law, because that can happen. Nepotism, cronyism, they're big things in politics.
Right.
I think I wasn't able to finish mine. I had gotten sidetracked. The only other major ones that I've had were actually already answered in the conversation. So we'll skip ahead from me. I guess I came a little less prepared than I thought, but I apologize for that. I just wanted to say that so far, honestly, Case, you have not necessarily changed where I am at political party wise, but you've given me like a more like po- you've given me more like a equal view, a more positive view of both sides in a sense, seeing potential in both sides in a sense, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, Jacob, let's see, because I had totally came underprepared. Let's see what else we have.
Sure. So I'm going to go backwards with my list of questions. So I'm going to say, right, so Alabama is maybe a little bit complicated when it comes to energy in the environment, because on the one hand, we're a coal state, we're an oil state. I think coal is a little less prominent now than it would have been in previous eras, and a little less important than it is like when you go in upper Appalachia, like Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia, no, but it's still there. We're also a nuclear state, a hydro state, and we could potentially, within reason, be a solar and wind state, or what have you. We're also the most biodiverse state in the southeastern United States. And I want to say, right, we certainly have people who work for Alabama Power and whatnot, and are going to have their own like opinions and interests that are shaped by that. But outside of that, right, there are a lot of people all over the map in District 6. Well, literally, right? Literally all over the map. But I mean all over the place politically, who would probably see protecting the environment is more of a priority for them than protecting the interests of Alabama Power or the energy industry as it stands. So, with all of that in mind, what is your approach to energy policy and environmental regulation?
I mean, honestly, like it's a hard balance, right? You don't want to do things that are going to allow the destruction of habitats or the destruction of the environment or just destruction of our communities. But at the same time,
he's frozen.
Think that it needs to be. Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to each, but I do firmly believe that we need to slim down the size of the federal government and the government in general. And really, my viewpoint, I mean, it extends not just from environmental standpoint, but to anything. I mean, let's just take, for example, I mean, you have folks that are, I mean, they've got a little stream in their backyard, and next thing you know, it's considered a protected wetland. And that's an like, okay, we're going too far with things. We need to allow people to have some freedom to do what they need to do to either earn a living or to improve.
Yeah,
getting in the way of people being able to do what they need. And
yeah, so Case, if you can hear us, you're freezing up a little bit, but I think we're getting the gist of what you're saying. Right, it's like environmental protection and the ecosystem is important, but you don't want government overreach to the point where it gets ridiculous.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not, and that's the thing. That's where I think that we can agree to disagree on certain things, because we're not going to agree on everything if someone's more leaning to the left and to the right. But I think the key thing is that we can agree that we can talk about it without lobbying insults or saying, well, this person's crazy or this, because at the end of the day, conservatives sometimes get pegged as people that don't care about the planet or don't care about their environment. And maybe for some people that's true, but I think for the most part, we don't want our communities tore up. We don't want the forestry tore up. We don't want the environment just in pieces. We don't want that, but it's just that at the same time, we're trying to balance government overreach and allowing people the freedoms to do what they need to do.
Yeah, I think in a lot of rural and Jefferson County, you have both a lot of working class white and black folks from both parties who are really into hunting, and hunters tend to be from based on what my experience and what I know is they tend to be really into the idea of conservation. They think the environment's important because it's part of their lifestyle, and but not all of those people are necessarily as left wing as I am.
To add up to append something to that, hunters can be in some cases beneficial to environments because there already exists natural hunters like wolves, off the top of my head, tigers, things like that. So if there already exist natural hunters, human hunters can help control populations of things like invasive species. We all want to help this planet because we all live on it. So, and we'd all very much like to continue living on it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the key thing is to understand, hey, we all live here. We all want the best. Not getting to our stated goals, but I think the important thing is sitting down with people, disagree on certain things, but at least you know that one person isn't hoping for the destruction of the planet and the other person is, you can have a mutual agreement there.
Yeah, so I think perhaps a point of agreement we can find on this, is aside from the national abortion ban, that you tend to emphasize on your website states' rights, and that comes up every once in a while, both in the state legislature now and in Congress, where sometimes there will be a push, by conservatives and Republicans to pass a bill that says, hey, states can't pass these certain, environmental regulations that go beyond what the federal government says. Would you agree that like Alabama and California have more or less the right to pass environmental regulations that they think will work for them without interference from the federal government, as long as it doesn't like violate like a constitutional right?
Yeah, that's exactly my viewpoint on many things. It is that, look, the states are ultimately, they should be able to decide what's best for their own state, and the federal government shouldn't get in the way. And unless, obviously, they're violating something that has been enshrined in the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. But I think me as a legislator in the U.S. Congress would look a lot different than if I was in the state legislature, and that's because at the federal level, I'm going to be about giving power back to the states, making sure.
Yeah. I think the gist of it was right. If you were in the legislature, you would probably be open to passing more robust regulations than you would as opposed to in Congress, because you see the constitutional and the policy differences in the way those two levels of government are supposed to work.
Right. The states know best what they need, and the federal government isn't going to know what all 50 states need. And so I think it's important that we give the states the power in order to do what they need to do. And so I was saying at the federal level, I would look a lot different as a legislator than I would at the state level.
Yeah. So there's a very important issue, right? We've talked a bit about age, but we've talked more about the age of as it concerns, right, when people get into politics, but not an age that's going to affect a lot more private citizens who don't even necessarily think about politics, right? Which is the Social Security system and the Medicare system. And so you've addressed that, like some things, in your view, like some things that the government currently does put stress on the Medicare and Social Security system. However, like even if we stop some of those things, or even if we didn't do those things, I think economists and government experts still tell us that we have a problem coming up ahead, which is the problem of solvency of these things, when we won't be able to pay out as many benefits as we're supposed to. So what changes, right, if any, would you make to the Social Security and Medicare systems to strengthen them, to improve, service, to maintain solvency, or even to expand them?
I think specifically regarding Social Security, and this is going to be one of those things where people will say, "Oh, he's trying to get rid of my Social Security." But really, if anyone tells you currently right now, if they're an elected official, if they're a candidate, and they say we can keep things exactly the way they are, and we're not going to take away your Social Security and everything staying the same, they're lying to you, because the money is simply, it's not there. And so, because whenever we first instituted Social Security, the amount of people working compared to the amount of people that were retiring or pulling Social Security, there were a lot more working people than people retiring. But now we've gone the complete other direction. We have a lot more people either. And as many people may know, whenever you pay into Social, and then you're pulling from the money that you paid into, it doesn't work like that. Right now, as I'm working, or as any of you are working, you are paying the current retired Social Security checks, and so that's a problem whenever you have more people retiring and compared to people working. And so there has been a surplus, because there used to be, like I said, the ratio used to be the other way. So there's a surplus.
But like the last part may still be worth repeating. The last maybe couple of sentences.
Yeah. I don't remember where it cut off, but I was basically saying, folks like me or you, if we pay into Social Security, there really won't be anything left, and we're just paying these taxes and then literally not getting any benefit from it whatsoever. And this might sound crazy, but at least maybe it doesn't. Maybe not to y'all's audience, but I would be in favor of. I don't think it's feasibly possible. This is just my magic wand perfect scenario. Just keep that in mind. But if there was no Social Security, and people were actually able to invest their own money, the same money that they're being taxed. They actually put that into the stock market, or they put that away somewhere and let that actually build up, and then they can use it later on down the road. And it actually is their money that they paid into. But that's the problem now is folks like me or you, that's not the case. And we actually are paying into it, and there won't be anything left if we don't make the structural changes now. And so I think that's just a case where the federal government has gotten too involved in people's private life. And I do think that the unfortunate circumstance is that we are going to have to raise the age of retirement gradually, maybe 1 month at a time for folks that are retiring until it gets up to maybe 70 years old or so. And that's whenever people, grit their teeth and they say that I'm trying to take away Social Security. And it's like I said earlier, if someone is not telling you that there needs to be structural changes, they're actually the one that is okay with you losing your Social Security, because at some point it's going to happen unless we make these necessary changes.
Yeah, I think that's the part I agree with. Now, I don't think you'll be surprised to know I don't necessarily agree with the solution. Right.
When you have a sec. I just wanted to say, I hate to be abrupt, but Zoom meetings, the free plan for Zoom meetings are on a bit of a time limit. Right now, it's at 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. If you have more Zoom meeting, that's something beyond my control. If you have more time, I can reset the Zoom meeting. I can put up a card on the stream, and we can come back in a second. But if you don't, if you're busy with something, we can just do a follow-up at a later date. That is up to you. We don't want to get in your way.
No, I can do like 10 more minutes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is for the audience, y'all don't need to go anywhere. I'm going to put up a card saying we'll be right back. And, well, we'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back. Unfortunately, due to a difficulty that I had with planning, so Zoom is really annoying about how they do their free meetings. So yeah, like I said, Zoom is really annoying about how they do their free meetings. They ask you to wait a certain time limit before starting a new one, and we unfortunately have exceeded that time limit. We asked Case about it. He has more business to he has physical therapy business to attend to, but what we have decided to do is plug his website, say a few closing words, things like that. Jacob, is there anything you want to close with?
Yes. So I want to disclose now to the audience, just like I did with Keith Williams. I also donated to our first guest, by the way, because Ken McPeters, because we don't like Tommy Tuberville in this house, and the enemy of our enemy is our friend. But this guest is also no exception. I've also donated $1 to him. If you like what he had to say, or you want to send a message to, uh, uh, Congressman Palmer and the people who consistently back him, then you can go to Dixon for Congress. Look at his website, maybe sign up and maybe donate, even just a small amount like I did. It's critical to keep in mind with someone like him. He's a self-employed physical therapist. He's a young man. He's a family man. Um, but unlike incumbents such as Congressman Palmer and even the Democratic incumbents we mentioned, Mr. Figures and Ms. Sewell, he's not going to have the same resources as an incumbent. So if you want to help him out a little bit, help him get his message across this district, then go to. I think it's just his surname. I think it's just Dixon for Congress. See,
that URL will be on your screen right now. That is Dixon for Congress. That URL will be on your screen in a moment, actually. My apologies. That is DixonForCongress.com. I need to shrink that. Where my font size at? There it is. Okay. That is on your screen right now is your URL. That is DixonForCongress.com. DixonForCongress.com. Donate if you want to. If you don't, up to you. Everybody has their own opinions. But anyway, we thank you for watching, and we apologize for the inconvenience. We wanted to talk a little more, but these things happen. Thank you for watching. This has been Critical Dispatch 6, where we dispatch critical information to you 6